Pastor Samuel Whitman was the kind of man everyone in the small town of Brooksville admired. With his charming smile and captivating sermons, he drew a congregation that hung on his every word. For years, he had been the moral pillar of the community, guiding his flock with an unwavering sense of righteousness. But beneath the surface, there was a darkness that no one could have imagined. Whit's life seemed perfect. He was married to his high school sweetheart, Rebecca, and they had 2 children. Their picture-perfect family was the epitome of Christian values. He had built the Brooksville Community Church from a modest group of workers into a thriving congregation. The church was more than just a place of worship. It was a sanctuary where people sought hope and guidance. Everything seemed ideal until the arrival of Emily Sanders. Emily, a beautiful and talented 27-year-old, joined the church choir a year ago. Her voice was mesmerizing, her presence captivating. As the choir director, Pastor Whitman spent a lot of time with Emily, helping her hone her talent. What began as a mentor-student relationship soon turned into something far more dangerous. Gossip started to circulate. Emily and Pastor Whitman were often seen together outside of church. They attended late-night choir rehearsals that stretched on long after everyone else had left. Some members of the congregation began whispering about their closeness, but no one dared confront the pastor directly. After all, he was a man of God, and Emily was a newcomer with a troubled past. Emily had moved to Brooksville after escaping an abusive relationship. She was looking for a fresh start and found solace in the church. For her, Pastor Whitman was not just a spiritual guide, but a savior who had given her hope. But the nature of their relationship became blurred, and soon it spiraled out of control. Rebecca, Pastor Whitman's wife, noticed the changes in her husband. He was distant, preoccupied, and often came home late without explanation. When she confronted him, he dismissed her concerns, insisting that he was merely helping Emily find her way back to God. Rebecca wanted to believe him, but something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. Then came the night that would change everything. It was a stormy evening in late November when Rebecca found a series of text messages on her husband's phone. The messages, filled with passion and longing, were from Emily. They spoke of secret meetings, of love, and of a future together. Rebecca's heart shattered as she realized her worst fears were true. Consumed by anger and betrayal, Rebecca confronted her husband. Pastor Whitman, caught off guard, tried to deny the affair, but the evidence was undeniable. He begged for forgiveness, swearing that it was over, that it had been a moment of weakness. But Rebecca was consolable. Her perfect life had been a lie. What no one knew was that Emily had become obsessed with Pastor Whitman. She believed that their love was destined, that he would leave his wife and children to be with her. She had even begun making plans for them to run away together. But after Rebecca's discovery, everything changed. The next Sunday, Emily was conspicuously absent from church. People noticed, and the whispers grew louder. The rumor mill churned, and soon the entire town knew about the affair. Pastor Whitman stood at the pulpit, preaching forgiveness and redemption, but his words felt hollow. His congregation watched him with suspicion and doubt. A week later, Emily's body was found in her small apartment. She had been brutally murdered, her throat slashed in a frenzied attack. The town was in shock. How could something so horrific happen to someone so young and full of life? The police launched an investigation, and it wasn't long before Pastor Whitman became the prime suspect. His affair with Emily was now public knowledge, and his reputation lay in tatters. But there was no physical evidence tying him to the crime, and he maintained his innocence. As the town grappled with the fallout, dark secrets began to surface. Emily had been receiving threatening messages in the weeks leading up to her death, warning her to stay away from the pastor. Some of the messages were traced back to Rebecca's phone, but Rebecca, too, denied any involvement, claiming that her phone had been stolen. The investigation took a chilling turn when a bloody knife was found buried in the woods behind the church. It matched the wound that had killed Emily, and DNA testing confirmed it had her blood on it. But the fingerprints on the knife were smudged, making it impossible to identify the killer. The town was divided. Some believed that Pastor Whitman had killed Emily in a fit of rage. desperate to keep his affair secret. Others thought Rebecca, driven by jealousy and betrayal, had taken matters into her own hands. The case grew more complex with each passing day, and the truth seemed to slip further and further away. The small town of Brooksville was gripped by fear and speculation as the investigation into Emily Sanders' murder unfolded. Pastor Whitman tried to maintain a facade of composure, but beneath the surface, he was a man on the edge. The church, once a place of unity and peace, had become a battleground of whispers and accusations. Detectives Sarah Daniels and Mark Hollis were assigned to the case. Both were seasoned investigators, known for their ability to untangle the most convoluted cases. As they delved deeper into the murder, they were struck by the stark contrast between the town's outward tranquility and the dark undercurrents swirling beneath. Their first step was to establish a timeline. Emily had last been seen alive on Friday evening, leaving the church after choir practice. Witnesses reported seeing her arguing with someone in the church parking lot, but it was too dark to make out who it was. The detectives interviewed everyone who had been at the church that night, but no one could recall anything unusual, except for one detail. A young choir member, Jessica, mentioned that she had seen Pastor's car leaving shortly after Emily had left. Jessica didn't think much of it at the time, but in light of Emily's death, it seemed significant. The detectives knew they needed to talk to Pastor Whitman again, but before they could, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Emily's phone was found hidden beneath a pile of clothes in her closet. When the detectives retrieved the text messages and call logs, they were stunned. The last person Emily had called was Pastor Whitman. The conversation had been brief, but the content was clear. Emily had been upset, accusing the pastor of leading her on and ruining her life. She threatened to go public with their affair if he didn't leave his wife. Confronted with this, Pastor Whitman admitted that Emily had called him that night, but he insisted that he hadn't gone to her apartment. He claimed he had gone home after the call and spent the evening with his family. Rebecca, however, contradicted this, stating that he had come home much later than usual, well past midnight. The detectives sensed a crack in Pastor Whitman's story, but had no concrete proof to pin him to the crime. They turned their attention to Rebecca, whose alibi also seemed shaky. The threatening messages sent to Emily had been traced back to her phone. When questioned, Rebecca broke down, admitting that she had sent the messages in a moment of rage, but denied having anything to do with the murder. Rebecca told the detectives that she had confronted Emily a few days before her death, begging her to leave her husband alone. According to Rebecca, Emily had been defiant, saying that she and Pastor Whitman were in love and that he was going to leave Rebecca soon. Rebecca had been devastated, but swore she would never kill anyone. Meanwhile, more secrets about Emily's past began to emerge. It turned out that she had been involved in a series of tumultuous relationships before coming to Brooksville. Her ex-boyfriend, Derek Hill, had a history of violence and had been seen in town just a week before the murder. Derek was quickly brought in for questioning. Derek was a wiry, intense man who seemed to harbor a deep resentment toward Emily. He admitted that he had come to Brooksville to talk some sense into her after hearing about her relationship with Pastor Whitman. He claimed that he had loved Emily despite their troubled past and couldn't stand the thought of her being with someone else, especially a married man. The detectives pressed Derek on his whereabouts the night of the murder, but he had an alibi. He had been drinking at a bar across town, with multiple witnesses confirming his presence. Frustrated, the detectives were back to square one. They had no clear suspects, only a tangled web of deceit and half-truths. As they combed through Emily's phone records and emails, they found something that chilled them to the bone. Emily had been keeping a secret journal, documenting her relationship with Pastor Whitman in detail. She had written about her love for him, but also about her fear. She mentioned receiving strange phone calls in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps outside her window, and feeling like she was being watched. The entries became increasingly paranoid and frantic. The last entry, dated just 2 days before her death, read, "He said He would kill me if I didn't keep quiet. I think he means it. I don't know what to do. I love him, but I'm so scared." The detectives now had a new theory. Someone had been threatening Emily, and it seemed like she knew who it was. But who was he? Was it Pastor Whitman, desperate to silence her? Was it Derek, unwilling to let her go? Or was there someone else entirely who hadn't yet come into focus? The investigation took another turn when a neighbor reported seeing a suspicious figure outside Emily's apartment the night of the murder. The neighbor described the person as tall, wearing and lurking near the entrance around the time of the crime. But when asked to identify the person, the neighbor couldn't be sure. Feeling the pressure mounting, Pastor Whitman made a public plea, standing on the steps of the church, his face pale and drawn. He professed his innocence, his voice breaking as he spoke of his love for his wife and his regret for the affair. The congregation watched in silence, their faces a mix of sympathy and suspicion. But behind the scenes, the detectives were closing in. A breakthrough came when they discovered a hidden camera in Emily's apartment. The footage was grainy, but it showed someone entering her apartment on the night of the murder, someone wearing a dark hoodie. The figure moved stealthily, their face obscured, but their actions were clear. They approached Emily, and there was a struggle, then nothing. The detectives felt a chill run down their spines. They had found the missing piece, but the figure's identity was still a mystery. They released a still image to the public, hoping someone would recognize the person. Days passed, and then a call came in that would change everything. The town was on edge. As the investigation reached its climax, the release of the still image from the hidden camera had stirred up a storm of speculation. Who was the hooded figure captured in Emily's apartment the night she was killed? It seemed like everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. Then, one morning, a call came in from a local motel. The manager reported that a man fitting the description of the figure in the photo had checked in the night of Emily's murder and hadn't been seen since. Detectives Daniels and Hollis rushed to the scene. In the room, they found clothes matching the ones seen in the footage and a knife with dried blood on it, but the man was gone. It didn't take long for them to identify the man as Michael Whitman, Pastor Whitman's estranged brother. Michael had a history of drug addiction and violence. He had been in and out of prison for years, estranged from the family, and no one in town knew he was back. The detectives realized they had overlooked a crucial piece of the puzzle: family. When confronted, Pastor Whitman was visibly shaken. He hadn't seen his brother in years and claimed he had no idea Michael was in town. But as they dug deeper, a darker story emerged. Michael had reached out to his brother months ago, desperate for money. Pastor Whitman had tried to keep it a secret, fearing it would ruin his reputation. It turned out that Michael had been blackmailing Pastor Whitman, threatening to expose his affair with Emily if he didn't pay up. Desperate to keep his life from falling apart, the pastor had given him money. But Michael's demands kept growing, and when he found out about the affair, he saw an opportunity for more. Emily's journal revealed another shocking detail. She had met Michael just days before her death. He had approached her, pretending to be concerned for her safety, warning her about Pastor Whitman's unstable behavior. But Emily wasn't fooled. She knew Michael was after money and had threatened to go to the police. That confrontation sealed her fate. Michael, desperate and furious, had gone to her apartment that night to silence her once and for all. He thought he could frame his brother for the murder and get away with everything, but he hadn't counted on the hidden camera capturing his every move. As the detectives pieced together the final details, they found Michael hiding out in an abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town. Cornered and with nowhere to run, Michael confessed to everything. He admitted to killing Emily in a fit of rage when she refused to give him money and threatened to expose his blackmail scheme. Pastor Whitman was devastated. His affair, his lies, and his attempts to cover up his brother's blackmail had led to Emily's death. He resigned from the church, his reputation in ruins. Rebecca, heartbroken and betrayed, filed for divorce, taking their children and leaving Brooksville for good. The town was left to pick up the pieces. The church, once the center of the community, became a reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. People whispered about Pastor Whitman's fall from grace, about how easily a life can be destroyed by secrets and lies. Michael Whitman was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His cold-blooded murder of Emily and his attempt to frame his own brother shocked even the most hardened jurors. As he was led away in handcuffs, he showed no remorse, only a bitter smile that sent chills down everyone's spine. For Detective Daniels and Hollis, the case left a bitter taste. They had solved the crime, but the aftermath left a trail of broken lives and shattered faith. As they filed away the case, they couldn't help but wonder how many more secrets lay hidden in the quiet town of Brooksville, waiting to be uncovered. The story of Pastor Samuel Whitman, his fatal affair, and the murder of Emily Sanders became a cautionary tale. It was a story of how greed, obsession, and betrayal could destroy everything and everyone in their path. And for the people of Brooksville, it was a painful reminder that even those who seem the most righteous can have the darkest secrets.